You don't know what true rage is until you watch the two people you love most clinking champagne glasses over your bleeding, broken body. They thought my final, rattling breath was the end of their problems. They didn't know the universe was about to send me back. And this time, I held all the cards. The cold stone of the patio was the last thing I felt. It was a brisk November evening at our cliffside estate in Carmel by the sea. The ocean roared below, a violent, crashing symphony that drowned out the sound of my own gasping breaths. I was paralyzed, clutching my stomach where the agonizing burn of whatever they had slipped into my Pinot Noir was tearing through my organs. My vision was blurring, pooling at the edges with dark, creeping shadows, but I could still see them perfectly. Donovan, my husband of 3 years, the man whose startup I had single-handedly funded, whose debts I had erased, whose name I had elevated in the cutthroat tech circles of Silicon Valley. He stood there, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Tom Ford suit, looking down at me with the mild annoyance of someone who had just stepped in a puddle. Next to him was Chloe, my best friend since our freshman year at Stanford. The woman I had made VP of public relations at my company, Viridian Dynamics. She was leaning against the glass railing, swirling her champagne, a soft, sympathetic pout on her perfectly painted lips. "It really is a tragedy, Victoria," Chloe murmured, her voice dripping with mock sorrow. "A sudden heart attack. The stress of the upcoming merger with Garrison and Hayes was just too much for the young, brilliant CEO. Did the wire transfer clear?" Donovan didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on my dying form. "Of course it did, darling," Chloe smiled, reaching out to stroke his jaw. 70% of her voting shares moved seamlessly into the offshore trust. By tomorrow morning, Viridian is ours, and Victoria will be a beautiful, tragic memory. I tried to scream. I wanted to tear their throats out. I wanted to ask why, even though the answer was written in the way his hand slid down her waist. They had been together for years, maybe since before he even proposed to me. My entire life, my marriage, my success. It was all a carefully orchestrated farm, and they were just waiting for the right season to harvest my assets and slaughter me. "Goodbye, Victoria," Donovan whispered. He didn't even push me. He just stepped over my convulsing body, took Chloe's hand, and walked back inside the warm, brightly lit mansion. They left me out there on the freezing stone. The poison paralyzed my lungs. My final thought wasn't of fear. It was a pure, unadulterated, burning hatred. A silent vow that if a soul could claw its way back from hell, I would drag them down with me. Then darkness, a terrifying, suffocating void. And then a gasp. I shot upward, my lungs expanding violently as I sucked in a massive gulp of air. My hands flew to my stomach, expecting the tearing agony of the poison, but I felt only the soft, cool touch of silk pajamas. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was sweating, trembling, my eyes darting wildly around the room. This wasn't the cold patio in Carmel. This was my penthouse apartment in San Francisco. The early morning fog was pressing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a muted grey light over the bedroom. Am I dead? Is this hell? I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the warm hardwood floor. I stumbled into the master bathroom and gripped the edges of the marble sink, staring at the woman in the mirror. I looked younger. The exhaustion lines around my eyes that had formed during the brutal Viridian IPO were gone. My skin was flushed, alive. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I darted back to grab it. The screen illuminated. Tuesday, May 14th, 2021. I dropped the phone on the bed as if it had burned me. My hands flew to my mouth to stifle a scream of disbelief. 3 years. I had gone back exactly 3 years. I snatched the phone up again, unlocking it with trembling fingers. I checked the news, the stock market, my emails. It was all real. It was 2021. Viridian Dynamics was still a privately held company. The Oakhaven Cliffside estate hadn't been purchased yet. And tomorrow was my wedding day. A hysterical, broken laugh clawed its way out of my throat. The universe hadn't just given me a second chance. It had given me the ultimate tactical advantage. I had all my memories. I knew every market shift, every corporate maneuver, and most importantly, I knew the rotten, blackened souls of the people sleeping down the hall and across the city. A soft knock on the bedroom door made me freeze. "Vic? You awake, babe?" Donovan's voice. Bile rose in the back of my throat. The last time I heard that voice, he was confirming the theft of my life's work while I died at his feet. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and forced my heart rate to slow. If I walked out there and killed him now, I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. Death was too quick, too merciful. They needed to lose everything. Their reputations, their wealth, their freedom, their minds. I arranged my face into a sleepy, radiant smile and opened the door. There he was. The handsome, charming Donovan, holding 2 cups of artisanal coffee from the cafe down the street. He looked at me with those warm, crinkling hazel eyes that had fooled me for so long. "Happy day before our wedding," he grinned, leaning in to kiss my forehead. I forced myself not to flinch. I let him press his lips against my skin, my own blood turning to ice water in my veins. "Happy day before, Donovan," I purred, taking the coffee. "I can't wait for the rest of our lives to begin." The hardest part wasn't the wedding. Walking down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang gown, staring into the eyes of my future murderer and promising to love and cherish him, was a masterclass in dissociation. When Chloe gave her maid of honor speech, wiping away fake tears as she talked about how destined Donovan and I were, I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. I hugged her. I thanked her. I let them believe they had successfully hooked their golden goose. The real challenge began in the months that followed. Revenge is not a blazing inferno. It is a slow-moving glacier that crushes everything in its path without making a sound. If I changed my behavior too drastically, they would get suspicious. So I became the absolute perfect victim. I became more reliant on Donovan. I played the stressed, overwhelmed founder, leaning on Chloe for emotional support and PR strategy. 6 months into the marriage, Viridian Dynamics was preparing for a massive Series B funding round. In my previous life, I had kept a tight grip on the financials, which meant Donovan and Chloe had to wait 3 years and literally murder me to get control. This time, I was going to hand them the keys to a rigged car and watch them drive it off a cliff. We were in the glass-walled boardroom of Viridian's headquarters. The executive team was gathered around the mahogany table. "Victoria, with the Series B approaching, we really need an internal CFO who can handle the sheer volume of capital," said Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was a former FBI forensic accountant I had hired as an independent auditor in this timeline. He was sharp, unbribable, and completely loyal to me because I had quietly paid for his daughter's experimental leukemia treatments through a dummy charity just weeks after I woke up in 2021. Arthur knew we were hunting rats, though he didn't know why I was so certain of their guilt. I sighed dramatically, rubbing my temples. You're right, Arthur. I'm drowning in the tech side of this platform. I can't handle the financials anymore. I looked across the table at Donovan. He was trying to look stoic, but I could see the greed twitching in his jaw. Donovan, I said softly, looking at him with wide, trusting eyes. You've been handling our micro-budget so well, and, well, you're my husband. There's no one I trust more in this world. I want you to step up as Chief Financial Officer. The room went quiet. Chloe, sitting to my left, placed a comforting hand on my arm. Vic, are you sure? It's a lot of pressure on him. It was a classic Chloe move. Pretend to protect me while secretly pushing for the exact outcome they wanted. I'm sure, I smiled, patting her hand. In fact, I want Donovan to have full signing authority on the Cayman offshore accounts we're setting up for the European expansion. I just don't have the bandwidth to double sign every wire transfer. Donovan's eyes practically dilated. The Cayman accounts. Unregulated, massive pools of capital. It was like handing a starving wolf a butcher shop. Victoria, I'm honored, Donovan said, his voice thick with feigned humility. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I thought, my smile never wavering. I know exactly what you're going to do. Over the next 8 months, I let the trap set. Using Arthur, I quietly monitored Donovan's access. Just as I anticipated, he couldn't resist. He started small, siphoning 50,000 here, 100,000 there, masking them as consulting fees to a firm called Kensington Holdings. Kensington Holdings was a shell company. What Donovan didn't know was that I had created Kensington Holdings through 3 different proxy servers and a law firm in Geneva. Every time he stole from Viridian, he was literally wiring money into an account I strictly controlled, leaving a massive, irrefutable digital paper trail of felony embezzlement with his unique cryptographic signature on every transaction. Meanwhile, I needed to isolate them socially and professionally. I needed their destruction to be a public spectacle. Chloe had grown arrogant. With Donovan controlling the money, she felt untouchable. She started taking liberties, treating the marketing budget like her personal slush fund for designer bags and trips to the St. Regis in Aspen. Trips she claimed were media networking retreats, but were actually romantic getaways with my husband. I let her. But I made sure Arthur's private investigators were at the St. Regis too. I had hundreds of high-resolution photos of my husband and my best friend tangled in the sheets of luxury hotel rooms, drinking the same vintage champagne they would one day drink over my dead body. But infidelity and embezzlement weren't enough. I didn't just want them to go to jail. I wanted them to betray each other. The bond between thieves is fragile, held together only by mutual greed. I needed to introduce a stressor that would shatter their trust and turn them into rabid dogs tearing at one another's throats. The opportunity came in the form of the Garrison and Hayes merger. In my past life, Garrison and Hayes was a rival tech firm that Donovan and Chloe were secretly negotiating with to sell Viridian's proprietary code. One evening, I invited Chloe over for wine on the penthouse terrace. The fog was rolling in, wrapping the city in a cold embrace. Chloe, I said, swirling my glass, letting my voice waver with manufactured vulnerability. I need your advice, as my best friend. Anything, sweetie? She cooed, sipping her wine. I found something concerning about the Cayman accounts. Chloe froze. The wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "Money is missing," I whispered, forcing a single, perfect tear to roll down my cheek. "Millions." And Arthur traced the routing numbers. "They're being diverted into a holding company, and... Chloe, the holding company is registered in your name." Her face went completely white. "What? Victoria, that's impossible. I don't..." "I know," I cried, grabbing her hands. "I know it's not you. Someone is framing you, and whoever it is has high-level administrative access. Chloe, the only other person with that access is Donovan." I watched the realization hit her like a freight train. I hadn't registered the shell company in her name, of course, but I had forged a set of highly convincing internal documents that made it look like the embezzled funds were tied to her social security number and her offshore PR accounts. "Donovan," she breathed, her eyes darting frantically. "I don't want to believe it," I sobbed, burying my face in my hands to hide my smirk. Why would my husband steal from the company and frame my best friend? It makes no sense. But the board is meeting next week. If Arthur presents these findings, the SEC will be called. You could go to federal prison, Chloe. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic radiating from her pores. She thought she and Donovan were partners in crime. Now, thanks to my little lie, she believed Donovan was setting her up to take the fall for the embezzlement so he could walk away clean. "Victoria, you have to delay the board meeting," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't. It's out of my hands," I lied flawlessly. "Arthur has already briefed the legal team. Chloe, you need to protect yourself. If you know anything, if Donovan has ever said anything to you, you need to gather evidence. You have to prove he did this, or you're going down." I watched the survival instinct override years of illicit romance in her eyes. The seed of paranoia was planted. By the time she left the penthouse that night, she wasn't Donovan's co-conspirator anymore. She was a cornered animal, ready to do whatever it took to save her own skin. The game was no longer just about waiting for them to strike. It was about watching them slowly, methodically, tear each other to pieces, all while I sat in the director's chair, calling the shots. The storm was finally here, and I was holding the lightning. The scent of stale gin and desperation began to permeate my home. Over the next 48 hours, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from artificial domestic bliss to a suffocating, silent war zone. Donovan and Chloe were suddenly acutely aware of each other's movements, their eyes darting, their smiles strained and brittle. I watched it all unfold through the discreet security cameras I had installed in the study and the guest bedroom. The footage was a masterclass in human panic. Chloe moved first. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Donovan was at a lunch meeting with potential investors from Goldman Sachs, she used her spare key to enter the penthouse. The audio feed picked up the frantic, shallow rhythm of her breathing as she locked herself in Donovan's home office. I watched her tearing through his mahogany desk drawers, the heavy scrape of wood on wood echoing in the quiet room. She plugged a flash drive into his personal laptop, her manicured fingers trembling violently as she downloaded his encrypted email archives. She was hunting for proof that he was framing her. What she found, of course, was the breadcrumb trail I had carefully laid out, a series of fabricated draft emails from Donovan to a dummy address discussing how to insulate himself and leave the PR department holding the bag for the Cayman accounts. When Donovan returned, he immediately noticed the subtle shift in his environment. The faint smell of Chloe's signature Chanel perfume hung heavy in the stale air of the office. The leather chair was angled an inch too far to the left. The mouse was warm. I watched him stand frozen in the doorway. the ice clinking in his glass of scotch, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the crystal. The realization washed over him. His partner, his lover, was digging his grave. He didn't confront her. Thieves operate in the shadows, and to confront her would require admitting his own guilt. Instead, he sought protection. In my previous life, Donovan had extensive connections with people who operated in the grey areas of the law. I knew he kept a federal district judge on retainer, a man named Richard Belmont. Judge Belmont was a relic of systemic corruption, a man who regularly issued sealed injunctions and buried federal investigations for Silicon Valley elites in exchange for untraceable crypto transfers. He was a predator draped in judicial robes, and I despised him. In my first life, Belmont was the one who had quietly signed off on the transfer of my assets after my heart attack, burying the autopsy report before the ink was even dry. This time, Belmont was going to burn right alongside them. Through Arthur's forensic surveillance, I listened to the burner phone conversation between my husband and the judge. The audio was crisp, capturing the low, frantic rumble of Donovan's voice over the distant hum of San Francisco traffic. "She's pulling the ripcord, Richard," Donovan hissed, pacing the length of our terrace, the cold wind whipping against the microphone. "Chloe is trying to download my transaction ledgers. She's going to use them to secure immunity from the SEC and pin the missing capital on me." "Calm down," Judge Belmont's voice grated through the speaker, thick with the arrogance of untouchable authority. "If she goes to the SEC, she exposes herself. She won't do it. You don't know her. She's terrified. I need an emergency injunction. Freeze all of Viridian's internal audit protocols. Block Arthur Pendleton from presenting any financial records at the board meeting on Friday. Claim it's part of a sealed federal inquiry." "That requires immense capital, Donovan. My risk is substantial." $500,000. Transferred to your Belize account by midnight? Just shut the board meeting down before she can hand over the files." "Done," Belmont replied. "I'll have the clerk file the injunction under seal. You handle your girlfriend." I sat in my downtown office, sipping a lukewarm espresso, listening to the recording play back through my secure headset. A genuine, terrifying smile spread across my face. Donovan had just committed federal bribery and obstruction of justice on a recorded line, wrapping Judge Belmont's corrupt career into a neat, inescapable package. They were doing all the heavy lifting for me. By Thursday night, the tension between Donovan and Chloe had reached a boiling point. We were hosting a pre-board meeting dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant in the financial district. The heavy velvet curtains and dim amber lighting of the private dining room made it feel like a crypt. The clatter of silver forks against porcelain plates felt deafening. Chloe was aggressively stabbing at her seared scallops, refusing to make eye contact with Donovan. Donovan sat stiffly, his jaw clenched so tight the muscle twitched under his skin. He was sweating, a thin, cold sheen of moisture catching the candlelight on his forehead. "Are you all right, darling?" I asked, reaching out to gently touch his hand. His skin was ice-cold and clammy. "Fine," he clipped, pulling his hand away just a fraction too quickly. "Just preparing for tomorrow. The board meeting." "I'm sure everything will go perfectly," Chloe said, her voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. She finally looked up, her eyes locking onto his with a predatory glare. "We all have exactly what we deserve coming to us, don't we, Don?" "I think we do, Chloe," he replied softly, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I really think we do." I took a slow sip of my Pinot Noir, relishing the deep, earthy taste on my tongue. I wasn't drinking poison tonight. Tonight, I was drinking the sweet, intoxicating nectar of their mutual destruction. Friday morning arrived with a biting, bone-chilling wind that rattled the thick glass of the Viridian Dynamics headquarters. The boardroom was an expansive, sterile space of brushed steel and polished concrete, offering a panoramic view of the grey, churning waters of the bay. I sat at the head of the long table, the leather of my chair squeaking softly as I shifted my weight. Arthur Pendleton sat to my right, his thick case file resting squarely in front of him. To my left sat the senior partners from Morrison and Forster, my outside corporate counsel. The rest of the board members, 8 seasoned venture capitalists, lined the sides, murmuring quietly among themselves. The heavy glass doors clicked open, and Donovan walked in, followed closely by Chloe. They both looked exhausted, their eyes hollow, the pristine tailoring of their designer clothes failing to mask the frantic, animal energy radiating from them. Donovan took his seat, offering the board a tight, practiced smile. He opened his briefcase with a sharp snap of the latches. He was confident. He believed Judge Belmont's injunction was coming at any second to shut Arthur down. Chloe sat rigidly, clutching a slim leather folio against her chest. Her knuckles were white. "Let's begin," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room. The murmurs ceased immediately. "We have a lot of ground to cover regarding the Series B funding, but first I'm handing the floor over to Arthur to review our internal financial audit." Donovan sat back, crossing his arms. He checked his Rolex. He was waiting for the door to open. He was waiting for salvation. "Thank you, Victoria," Arthur said, standing up. He didn't open his file. He just looked directly at Donovan. "Over the past 8 months, my team has conducted a shadow audit of the Cayman offshore accounts managed by our CFO. Donovan smiled, a thin, arrogant line. "Arthur, before you proceed, I believe there's a legal matter that takes precedence. We should be receiving a court order." The boardroom doors swung open, but it wasn't a court clerk. It was a team of 4 agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with the bright yellow letters of the FBI emblazoned across the back. 2 suits from the Securities and Exchange Commission walked in right behind them. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The silence was absolute, save for the heavy, rhythmic thud of the agents' boots on the concrete floor. Donovan's face lost all its color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked wildly at the door, then back at the agents. This wasn't Judge Belmont's rescue. "Donovan Hayes?" the lead FBI agent asked, his voice a flat, uncompromising bark. Yes?" Donovan stammered, the smell of his nervous sweat suddenly sharp and acrid in the enclosed space. "What is the meaning of this? I have an injunction." "Judge Richard Belmont was taken into federal custody 20 minutes ago," the SEC agent stated coldly. "We have the audio recordings of your wire fraud, the $500,000 bribe you routed to his Belize account, and the cryptographic signatures tying you to the embezzlement of $22 million from Viridian Dynamics." Chloe leaped out of her chair, the leather folio clattering onto the table. "I have nothing to do with this," she shrieked, her voice cracking in pure hysteria. She scrambled backward, pointing a shaking finger at Donovan. "He did it! I have the flash drive! He was transferring the money! He set up the shell accounts! He was trying to frame me!" "I have all the proof right here." Donovan stared at her, his eyes weighed with a horrified, violent betrayal. The last thread of their twisted partnership snapped. "You stupid bitch!" Donovan roared, lunging across the table toward her. The heavy mahogany table shuddered under his weight. "You spent half the money. You set up the Kensington accounts. I have the text messages on my phone. You authorized the transfers while we were at the St. Regis." The FBI agents moved with practiced, terrifying speed, Two of them grabbed Donovan by his bespoke suit jacket, slamming him face first onto the polished concrete floor. The sickening crack of his nose, breaking against the stone, echoed sharply through the room. Blood instantly bloomed across the grey floor, pooling near my sleek, black heels. "Don't move! Hands behind your back!" the agent yelled, the cold, metallic ratcheting of handcuffs echoing like a gunshot. Chloe was sobbing hysterically, pressed against the glass wall of the boardroom, her mascara running down her cheeks in thick, black rivers. An SEC agent was calmly reading her Miranda rights, taking the flash drive from her trembling hands. They were both confessing. They were handing over every piece of evidence needed to lock each other in a concrete box for the next 30 years. I stood up slowly, the fabric of my suit rustling in the quiet chaos. I walked around the edge of the table and stood over Donovan. He wrenched his neck to look up at me. His face was a mask of agony and confusion, blood pouring from his shattered nose, dripping onto his teeth. "Victoria," he choked out, his voice wet and pathetic. "Victoria, please, it's a mistake. You have to believe me. You—" I crouched down, bringing my face inches from his. The smell of his copper blood mixed with the lingering scent of his expensive cologne. I looked deep into his hazel eyes, the same eyes that had watched me suffocate on that cold stone patio 3 years and a lifetime ago. "I know it's not a mistake, Donovan," I whispered, my voice so low only he could hear it. I let the facade drop completely, exposing the cold, bottomless void of my hatred. "I know about the poison. I know about the patio in Carmel. I know exactly how it felt to die while you drank champagne." The confusion in his eyes morphed into an alien, paralyzing terror. He stopped struggling against the agents. His breath hitched in his throat as his mind desperately tried to comprehend the impossibility of my words. He was looking at a ghost, a demon wearing his wife's skin. "Have a good life, Donovan," I said softly. I stood up and smoothed my jacket. I didn't look back as the agents hauled them to their feet and dragged them out of the boardroom. Their screams and accusations faded down the hallway, leaving nothing but the sound of the wind rattling the glass and the quiet, rhythmic ticking of my watch. They thought they had buried a victim. They didn't realize they had planted a seed, and the harvest had finally come. If you felt the adrenaline rush of this ultimate second-chance revenge story, you know that true justice doesn't come from waiting. It comes from taking control. Don't let this story end here. Smash that like button to show your support for outsmarting the villains in our lives. Share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying plot twist, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deeply human, jaw-dropping drama storytelling every single week.